Ever felt that slight knot of anxiety trying to ask for something simple, like an extra pillow or directions to the pool when you're staying at a hotel somewhere English isn't the main language?
Hmm.
Or maybe you're on the other side of the desk, knowing that the first words you speak could define a guest's entire experience, but, well, you feel a little unsure about your English.
Yeah, that pressure is definitely real.
Welcome to Daily English Practice, Listen and Speak. Today, we're doing a deep dive into the world of hotels. Specifically, we're focusing on the English needed for smoother interactions. We're calling this one English for Hotel Booking, but it covers way more than just booking.
Right. It's about the whole experience, really, for travelers and, importantly, for the staff working at the front desk.
We've gathered some really interesting sources for this deep dive. We've got a research paper looking at English skills in hotels in Medan, Indonesia. Pretty specific.
Yeah, and we've also pulled together some, practical guides, conversation examples, essential phrases.
And even a peek into what front desk staff are actually
Mhm.
talking about online regarding things like taking bookings adds a bit of real-world flavor.
Definitely. So our mission today, really, is to unpack why English is just so critical in hospitality
Hmm.
and maybe more practically equip you with those key phrases and insights,
Hmm.
whether you're the guest checking in or the person behind the desk.
Kind of a shortcut to feeling more confident in those hotel English situations.
Exactly.
Okay, let's jump right in then. Our source material makes a really strong case for why English matters so much, especially for front office staff. What did the research actually highlight there?
Well, the research paper we looked at, it didn't mince words. It actually used the term paramount.
Paramount. Wow. Okay.
Yeah, paramount, meaning, absolutely essential for front office staff if they want to provide excellent service.
Mhm.
And the core reason they emphasized, it boils down to that first impression.
Ah, the classic first impression. You only get one chance, right?
Yeah.
How quickly do they say guests form that initial impression?
It's surprisingly fast. One source mentioned guests form their impression, like within the first 60 seconds of interacting with staff.
60 seconds,
Yeah.
seriously.
Just 1 minute, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not just about, how nice the lobby looks. It leans heavily on that initial chat at the front desk.
Okay.
If the communication is clear, welcoming, efficient, it sets a positive tone right away. But if there's hesitation, misunderstanding, maybe some difficulty, that first minute can unfortunately, start things off badly.
60 seconds to make or break it. That's pretty intense. So beyond that immediate moment, how does English proficiency really tie into the hotel's overall success and, the guest experience long term?
Oh, it goes much deeper. The study directly links English skills to those core things you expect in quality service. Competence, friendliness, knowledge, a good service attitude.
Right.
Think about it. Showing competence often needs clear communication, right? Answering questions properly, handling requests smoothly, solving problems effectively.
Makes sense.
And friendliness, too, that's conveyed through language. Warm greetings, a helpful tone, polite conversation. All that needs a certain level of English fluency, especially with international guests.
Mm-hmm.
The research even drew a clear line between high-quality service from these frontline folks and a positive impact on the hotel's bottom line, financial performance.
So happy guests mean repeat business, good reviews.
Exactly. Satisfied guests come back, they recommend the place. It's good for business.
It really makes perfect sense. English isn't just sort of a nice extra. It's a fundamental tool for staff to actually do their job well, especially when guests speak different languages.
Yeah.
It handles the practical stuff and that crucial people connection.
Precisely.
But achieving that level of fluency, it sounds like a challenge.
Hmm.
What did the research find about the actual English levels among hotel staff, particularly in that Medan study?
Yeah, this is where it gets quite interesting and maybe a bit concerning.
Yeah.
They looked at staff in three-star hotels there. And interestingly, the perception from hotel leaders was often that their staff's English was below the mark, like below the passing grade they aimed for, maybe around 70 on their scale.
Okay, so management thought there was a problem.
Right. But then when the staff actually took a specific English test, one designed for front office tasks, the results were, a bit different, but still showed a gap. The biggest group, 40% of them, scored in the 50-59 range.
Which is still below that target of 70.
Exactly. So the actual measured skill wasn't quite hitting the target needed, even if maybe it wasn't as low across the board as some managers perhaps feared for everyone. But that gap between the target and the reality for a lot of staff, it was definitely there.
Okay, so a discrepancy between perception and test results. But the main takeaway is still that many staff weren't quite at the proficiency level needed for really smooth interactions. What did the researchers pinpoint as the main reasons for this difficulty when staff had to talk with foreign guests?
The study highlighted 4 key factors. The first one was something called L1 interference.
L1, their first language.
Exactly, their native language.
Yeah.
In this study, the participants spoke languages like Batak and Indonesian. They reported that when they tried to speak English, they often found themselves thinking in their first language and basically doing a direct word-for-word translation in their head.
Oh, right. Trying to translate phrase by phrase as you go. I can see how that would slow you down and make the English sound, well, a bit clunky.
Totally. Languages just have different structures, different idioms, different ways to be polite or direct. A literal translation from Indonesian or Batak into English often ends up sounding awkward and can really hinder clear communication and fluency.
Makes sense. What was the second reason?
The second was related to their educational background. Now, many staff had studied hospitality, so they weren't complete beginners with English.
Okay.
But they felt their past English education, like in school, had focused really heavily on grammar rules and reading comprehension.
Ah, so lots of theory, maybe passing exams, but not enough actually using the language in real-time conversation.
Precisely. They might have known the rules, but they lacked enough practice in the productive skills, speaking and listening, which are absolutely vital for front desk work.
Okay, so L1 interference, educational focus.
Yeah.
What else?
The third factor was less English exposure outside of work. Even though they used some English daily at the hotel, many hadn't had formal English lessons recently. Some, it had been over 4 years.
So maybe their learning kind of stalled and just using it at work wasn't enough intensive practice to keep improving.
Yeah, that seems to be the case. And tied into this was a lack of self-confidence, they reported. It's kind of a tricky cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
You need confidence to speak more and get more exposure, but you need that exposure and practice to build the confidence in the first place. Without dedicated practice or maybe more immersive exposure outside of just their immediate job tasks, improvement was slow.
Got it. And the fourth reason?
The fourth key reason was the absence of an ESP test during recruitment.
ESP English for specific purposes. What does that mean here?
Right. ESP focuses language training and testing on the specific vocabulary, grammar, and communication skills needed for a particular job. So for hotel front desk staff, an ESP test would check things like handling check-ins, describing rooms and amenities, dealing with complaints, giving directions, managing phone bookings, the actual tasks.
Okay.
The study found that hotels often just relied on general interviews. Maybe they'd ask a few basic English questions, but it wasn't a thorough test tailored to the specific communication demands of that front desk role.
That seems like a really critical point. If you're not specifically testing for the ability to do the job in English during hiring, it makes sense that some staff might start without all the necessary skills, making the training challenge even bigger later on.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've covered why English is so vital and the challenges staff often face. Let's shift gears now to the practical side, the actual English needed for those everyday interactions. Based on our sources, what are the key phrases and conversation points? Maybe starting with that first big interaction, booking a room.
Absolutely. Booking is a big one. Whether you're the traveler calling or the staff member taking the call, specific language really helps. If you're calling, you'd usually start by saying why you're calling and asking about availability. Something like, "Hello, I'd like to inquire about booking a room." Or maybe more direct, "I'd like to make a reservation for 2 nights."
And then you need to give the dates, obviously.
Right. Do you have a room available from date to date? You also need to be clear about who's staying and what kind of room.
Like, I need a room for 1 person or for 2 adults and 1 child. And the room type too, right? Standard, deluxe.
Exactly. Do you have a standard room available? I'd like to book a deluxe room. Or are there any suites free? You might also need to specify the bed type. I need a room with a double bed, or maybe with 2 single beds.
And price. Always got to ask about the price.
For sure. What's the price per night? And it's smart to clarify what's included. Things like, does that price include breakfast?
Yeah.
Or is VAT included? Is there a service charge on top of that?
Good point about clarifying inclusions. What about amenities?
Oh yeah, people often ask about those up front. Do you have a swimming pool? Is there a gym? Is Wi-Fi available in the rooms? Maybe even, do you offer an airport shuttle service?
Okay. And then to lock it down, you need to give your details and usually credit card info.
Right. The staff will need your name, phone number, email address to confirm everything. And yes, typically credit card details, number, expiry date, maybe that security code to guarantee the reservation.
Now, you mentioned earlier there was that Reddit discussion among hotel staff about bookings. What was the interesting takeaway there about how people book? Because calling feels traditional, but online booking is everywhere now.
Yeah, the discussion was really insightful about some of the friction points. Staff were talking about why guests still call, even with the big push towards online booking.
Okay, why do they?
Well, from the traveler's side, reasons included needing specific accessibility features that maybe aren't easy to select on a website.
Ah, that makes sense.
Some people just expressed a lack of trust in websites, especially those third-party booking sites. Maybe they had a bad experience before.
Mm,
A common one mentioned was guests hoping to snag a better rate or a last-minute deal by talking directly to someone at the hotel, although staff suggested this is maybe less likely to work now than it used to.
interesting.
And honestly, many just wanted to speak to a human, for reassurance, to double-check details, feel more comfortable, or maybe even just to confirm a booking they made somewhere else.
So it's not always about not being able to book online. It's often specific needs, trust issues, or just wanting that human touch.
Precisely. And then from the hotel staff side, they often much prefer online bookings, especially directly through the hotel's own website.
Why is that?
Well, staffing issues are a big one. Front desk agents are often juggling guests right there in front of them, checking people in, answering questions, sorting problems. Phone calls for bookings pull them away from that immediate task.
Right, less efficient for them.
Yeah. Plus, prices are often managed centrally or fixed online now, so the person at the front desk might not actually have the power to offer that better deal the caller's hoping for anyway.
That's a really interesting point that came up, the confusion some travelers have between calling the hotel and booking directly. When for the hotel, booking directly usually means using their website. Calling can actually be less efficient for the staff on site.
Exactly. Understanding that little nuance can help you choose the best way to book. Use the website for straightforward stuff, but maybe call if you have complex needs or urgent questions the website doesn't answer.
Good tip. Okay, so booking sorted. Let's move to the next key moment. Checking in. You've arrived.
Right, the arrival. First thing is identifying yourself and your reservation. The key phrase is pretty simple. Hello, I have a reservation under your name. The staff will then probably ask for your ID passport or ID card. And they'll need payment, usually credit card, for the stay, and maybe a security deposit for extras. They might say something like, could I see your passport, please? And could I have a credit card for the security deposit?
Standard procedure. And once they've done that,
They'll give you your room key, or key card, probably.
yeah.
You might need directions. Could you tell me how to get to my room? Or which way is room 405?
Mm-hmm.
If you've got bags, you might ask, is there someone who can help with my luggage? And like you said earlier, this is often when you might ask about getting into your room early if you've arrived before the official check-in time, or confirm about a late checkout you might need. But that always depends on whether the room is ready or available.
Right, subject to availability. So, check-in is confirming who you are, payment, getting the key, basic directions. What about once you're actually in the room and you need something or have questions?
Yes, that leads to a whole range of common requests. People often ask about the hotel facilities. Where can I find the swimming pool? What time does the gym open? Is there a restaurant here? Where's the business center?
And just needing extra bits and pieces for the room is super common, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. Simple things like, can I get an extra towel, please? Or could you bring up another pillow? Or asking for more shampoo or soap.
And the all-important Wi-Fi question.
Always. Is there Wi-Fi in the room? And crucially, how do I connect?
Getting food delivered too, room service.
Yep. Can I order room service?
Yeah.
Maybe asking about the hours or what's on the menu.
Mm.
And people often need local advice. Can you recommend a good place to eat nearby? Or how do I get to the museum from here, Ersply? And confirming timings? What time is checkout? Or is it possible to request a late checkout?
Okay, those cover a lot of the everyday, usually positive interactions. But inevitably, sometimes things go wrong. How do you handle issues or complaints? That requires a different set of phrases, I imagine.
It does. And usually a calm approach helps too. The first step is just clearly stating there's a problem. A simple, polite phrase like, excuse me, there seems to be an issue with my room. Or more directly, I have a problem with my room.
And then you need to explain what the actual issue is. Our sources had some memorable examples.
They certainly did, ranging from the fairly common like the TV remote isn't working or the Wi-Fi signal is really weak here to noise problems. There's a lot of noise coming from the elevator, or I think someone's moving furniture upstairs.
Mhm.
Then there are maintenance things. The hot water isn't working in the shower. And yes, the standout one. I'm afraid I found a rat in my room.
Yikes. Okay, finding a rat definitely needs clear communication to get sorted fast. How do staff typically respond to these sorts of things, based on the examples?
Well, the response is obviously varied with the problem, but the pattern was usually acknowledge the issue, apologize for the hassle, and then propose a fix. So it could be, I'll send a technician up right away to look at the TV, or I'm very sorry about the noise, I'll have a word, or we sincerely apologize for that, would you like us to move you to a different room?
Right.
For something serious like the rat, you'd expect immediate action, probably a room change, maybe other compensation, and definitely a big apology. The sources also mention things that might come up at checkout, like if a guest accidentally broke something, like a shampoo bottle, or used things from the minibar staff, need to communicate those charges clearly then.
Got it. So being able to explain the problem clearly as a guest and understand and offer solutions as staff is crucial for fixing things smoothly. Okay, finally, let's quickly cover checking out.
Checking out is usually pretty straightforward. You just let the staff know you're leaving. Hi, I'd like to check out, please. You'll give your name or room number. It's your name, room 502. Hand back the key or key card.
Review the bill.
Yeah, exactly. Look over the bill for any extra charges, minibar, room service, whatever, and then make the final payment, usually by card. The staff might ask, did you use anything from the minibar? Or maybe just, how was your stay? You might need to ask something like, could I leave my luggage here for a couple of hours? Or check, is there a charge if I check out a bit late?
Okay. And one last scenario.
Mhm.
What if plans change and you need to cancel a reservation before you even get there?
Our sources covered that too. If you need to call and cancel, again, state your purpose clearly. Hello, I'm calling because I need to cancel a reservation. You'll need to give them details so they can find it. The reservation is under the name, your name. It was for the date, or the booking reference number is.
Makes sense. They need to find the booking.
Right. The examples mentioned reasons people gave, like, I need to cancel due to personal reasons, or unfortunately, my wife is sick, so we won't be able to travel. Just being clear and having the reference details handy makes it much easier for everyone.
So we've really walked through the whole cycle, haven't we? Booking, checking in, requests, dealing with problems, checking out, even canceling, all from a communication angle.
And honestly, understanding these interactions, having some of these phrases ready, whether you're the traveler or the staff, it's incredibly valuable.
Mm.
For the traveler, it just reduces so much potential stress, makes the stay feel smoother, more comfortable, you feel more capable.
Yeah, definitely more independent. And for the staff, it really empowers them to deliver that high-quality service we talked about earlier, the research called essential, tackling those challenges of proficiency and maybe lack of practice head-on by focusing on the actual language needed for these real situations. That seems like the most practical path to boosting both competence and competence.
Exactly. Effective English communication really is the bedrock of a good hotel experience. It ensures those strong first impressions and keeps everything running smoothly, from the moment someone inquires about a room to when they hand back the key.
So when we think about the difficulties staff might face getting enough practice and exposure, and maybe the hurdles travelers sometimes encounter with different booking systems or unexpected issues, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? What more could the hospitality industry and maybe language learning providers do to bridge that gap more effectively?
That's a great question.
How could they maybe collaborate or innovate better to make sure everyone involved, guests and staff, feels more confident, more capable, and just, well, understood? Something to think about next time you're packing your suitcase or perhaps getting ready for your next guest at the front desk.